When we get it down the road here.
All right, let's see if it'll start. So hi everybody. Hey Gary, how you doing?
Howdy.
You know they had a tornado on Monday at Oshkosh.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Were you there still?
No, I left on Thursday.
Okay, we left Friday, so we were lucky too. All right. Well, hey, hi everybody. Thanks for spending time with us this morning, this evening. So we're going to try to focus as much as we can on the Harvard. I've got a bunch of slides I've been trying to detail just for the Harvard. So if you have questions or comments, jump in. Let's make it interactive and learn from each other, and we'll get through this in a fun way. All right. Maybe mute your mics if you're not talking at the moment, just to keep the background noise down. Steve's trying to record this for other folks that can't make it in. Steve sent around a T-6 test that we'll ask everybody to fill out and sign it and send it back, so it'll be in the records for everybody. So that'll be a good thing. Well, here's a picture of our Harvard, and it's a Harvard 2. Anybody know more of the history on this thing? I know it came out to California probably about 20 years ago. And I heard a story about Doug Schuster flying it out, and it was not in very good shape. The prop was rattling, it was missing and banging. And have him tell you the story sometime if you have a chance of talking about it. But it's in great shape now. Looks really good. Just came through the annual and in pretty good shape, I think. So. All right, so I have just a couple slides just for fun, just kind of talking about the history of just the airframe and so forth. So the first prototype came out in 1935. They gave a prototype on it. I'm going to try and move this screen here in just a minute. I can get my mouse to work here. I got all your pictures covering up some of my stuff here. All right, let's kind of press ahead. Anyway, so let's see. I'm just trying to get rid of that banner right there if I can. All right. Anyway, so I'll just kind of skip this here in here. So the first airplanes that they produced were open canopies. They were basically basic trainers. So BT-9s, BT-14s, and so forth. Army Air Corps decided they wanted closed canopies, so they went on to the advanced trainer concept. The BC-1s, SNJ-1s. There were 15,495 airplanes built across all the basic variants. And so it was obviously a very successful series of airplanes for North American. There's a BT-9 with a canopy, so that's more on the basic trainer side, so fixed gear. A BT-14, kind of a cousin of the BT-13. And then here's the first one. This is SNJ-1 BC. So they call them basic combat then, as far as anyway, you can kind of start seeing some nice similarities there with the cowling. It actually was a fabric covered fuselage, kind of interesting. And it had like the Ford trimotor, vertical on the back as far as the corrugated metal. So here's an SNJ-2. SNJ-2s have a wet wing, and so they're a pain in the butt, kind of like the BT-13, where you've got to seal around all the ribs and spars to keep the gas in the airplane, and so that's a high maintenance deal. It's got a pretty neat looking rudder on there, and the Skytypers were using these things for a long time. I think they still have 3 or 4 of these on the East Coast. So kind of a fun question. So what year was the last active military fleet of T-6s required? Anybody remember that? Ben's thinking. How about you, Gary? Steve? So check this out. November of 1995. Isn't that crazy? So South Africa actually was the last country that used these airplanes. They had 95 airplanes. Sorry, I jumped my speech. They had 95 airplanes in service for that time. Like, check that lineup. Isn't that incredible? And so there was a guy named Ray Stutzman back in Indiana that imported basically all 95 of these airplanes. And he absolutely killed the T-6 market for about probably 10 years. Because you know what he did? And you guys remember this? You know what he did? He took a double page ad in Trade a Plane. He listed all the airplanes for sale. How many hours, all the variants, the numbers of the airplane, the serial numbers and so forth. And the T-6 market went from $40-some thousand an airplane down to about $20,000 an airplane. just the oversupply just absolutely killed the market. So anyway, he eventually got them all sold. Rob Hayford at Chino has one, and they're pretty sweet airplanes. One thing that was interesting is they unconnected the center flap and wired it in the up position because they felt that it was blanking out the tail too much. So I think it's more of a wives' tale. I don't think it actually does that much, but anyway, just where it was. Okay, so bonus question, Steve Rose, who bought all the parts from the South African Air Force?
Probably Fred Bell.
It's your buddies in Texas.
Oh, really?
Lance Aircraft. They bought all those parts. I mean, containers and containers of parts. So, the good thing is we can get them. The bad thing is they're not inexpensive, but just having the ability to have them is a pretty good thing. Okay, so just kind of real quick, the overall dimensions of the airplane: 29 feet, wingspan's 42, height's 12. So the question would be, like in the C-47, you guys that fly it, you know that if the wingtip will clear, the tail will clear. So the question for you guys, if the wingtip clears, will the tail clear like a post when you're spinning the airplane around? So answer is no. So unfortunately, if you look at the center where the pilot's sitting out to the wingtip and figure that's going to be like, I don't know, 21 feet. Look at the length of the airplane at 29 where the pilot's sitting. You can hit a pole. So if you're spinning the airplane around, the wingtip clears, you still can get it with a rudder. So just a cautionary thing. So anyway, another interesting fact is the North American, mostly for the Korean War, converted airplanes from the earlier models up to the G model. So they actually went out to the fleet, took airplanes back in, and did a lot of modifications to about 2,068 airplanes were modified. And so they did quite a job on them. The G models that you can see up here on the top, that's not a great picture, but on the top of the roller structure, they put a tag on there. It's got the old airframe number, and now it's a G and the serial number and so forth there of the conversion. And so anyway, so just because we all fly different airplanes across time, it's a good thing to just kind of talk about what the G models are versus the Ds. And so, same basic airframe, but they made some changes. This is probably a better thing here. So with the stroke of a pen, they increased the gross weight by 325 pounds. They incorporated the steerable tail wheel, like they call it the P-51 steering tail wheel. Old airplanes just had a lock-unlock on the left longeron, and they put them all over the P-51 like we have in the Harvard. Really nice system. I think that it's much more pilot friendly. So they increased the fuel system by 30 gallons by putting two 15-gallon bladders out toward the wingtips and the outer part of the wing. They incorporated low fuel lights. There is no reserve setting in a G model, no more power push, and they have what are called high visibility canopies. So airplanes like mine, I have an SNJ4. I have all the bars all across the sides of the canopies. And so it's easy to miss traffic, so you have to really keep your head on a swivel. The Harvard and the high-vis canopies are pretty stinking nice. And then also the hydraulic hand pump is now in the engine compartment instead of in the cockpit for a true G. Okay, here's a panel of the Harvard, and it's not a stock panel, so it's a little different in terms of location and where the various controls and things are. It's laid out pretty nice. It's just not stock, so it's just a little harder when you have a new guy in the airplane because he can't really read the book and have everything kind of fall into place. But it's nicely done. It's very, very nice condition. Airplane has what's known as a small barrel primer. So a lot of the airplanes have a primer diameter about twice the size of this airplane's primer. And so it takes twice as many shots of prime as it does in a stock primer to be able to get the right amount of gas fed to it. So let's see, in this airplane, the fork pack, landing gear lights, when the gear is up, you have two red lights up in the upper section that stay on. I'm not sure why that is, but it is what it is. You can kind of see the rest of the dials and everything there. So anybody have any questions or comments on the panel? Okay. All right, right side. So we've got the lights over there. We've got a fuse panel picture coming in a minute. We've got a USB plug there for iPads and so forth, which is super handy. Left side, we've got the throttle. So it's got a nice big full hand throttle, more like a Mustang than a T6 that was put in. Works pretty good. The push to talk for the radio is on the end button of the throttle. So it's pretty nice. Car beats down there beneath that placard. Let's see, what else can we see there? Probably about it.
Trigger also works for the radio.
That's again?
Stick trigger also works for the radio.
Okay, very good. And then intercom is a hot mic, or is that a push to talk? Do you remember?
Let's see, the intercom panel, the right button, if you push it, it switches between voice and push to talk. Push to talk is the button on top of the stick.
So push to talk's on top to the intercom or to the tower?
The trigger is the radio, and then the push to talk, you see the little button on top of the stick?
Yeah.
That's push to talk for the intercom in the push to talk mode. And it's also voice activated. So if you, the right knob on the intercom box there, every time you press, switches between press to talk or voice activated mode.
Okay.
So usually leave it voice activated for takeoff. I might just go to push to talk mode because you get a lot of engine noise through the mic. But
good idea. And then of course the way to just double check all the buttons is watch the radio, right? Get a little TX light if it's transmitting versus intercom.
Yeah. So it's easy to check what you got. Usually get into an airplane and you start trying to figure out what does what.
Sure, absolutely.
The aft cockpit also has radio on the throttle, but push to talk is on the map case. There's a red button there for push to talk. We didn't put anything on the stick because sometimes the stick is removed and sometimes not.
Sure. Yeah, no, good idea. Great idea. All right. Okay, so here's the switch and the breaker, or fuses. Sorry, the fuses on as well as the switches here. So you can see the battery master on the far left, alternator on the far right, the nav strobes, avionics, second row, landing light, taxi light, and so forth. And then the start switch is the far right, second row. And so that's a nice clean panel. Works good. Okay, let's see. All right, now we're going to jump back to a little bit of history, or we'll just kind of catch up. So this engine is amazing. It actually got an award in 2016 for being a historical launch, kind of an engineering marvel, if you will. So that's a great thing, and it's kind of scary as well when you just kind of look at things that have been running since 1925. So we're flying a piece of history for sure. All right, so AN 1340. Our 1340 AN1 is the engine. Test question, 1,340 cubic inches, 9-cylinder, has a geared supercharger, 600 horsepower at takeoff, 36 inches, 2,250 RPM, and about 62 gallons per hour fuel flow. Test question. All right, let's see, the 2-barrel carburetor. Engine is 825 pounds, and they're using either Benix or Bosch magnetos. I've been using Bosch's for 40 years. I really like them. Easy, they're dependable, and they work really well.
Yeah, we just
we have Bosch
to Bosch. We got Bosch now on ours.
Yep. Super nice magnetos, really nice. And let's see, most guys are using them W120 or 608. Once the airplane's broken in, and most guys are using the detergent, the W, which keeps inside the airplane. The engine's very nice and clean. 8087, you can get it. We can't get it much these days, so 100 low lead. Who knows what's happened on this new fuel? I don't know. It sounds like they make a few steps forward and a few steps backwards, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Gary, any news you picked up at Oshkosh on the fuel? No, not so much. How about you, Steve? Or Ben? Any rumors on fuel?
The only thing about the fuel is that I guess there's only like 3 companies actually making it, and since nobody wants it, they're not in a big hurry to make anymore.
Okay.
So,
and then are they still working on a 2030 introduction or phase out of low lead? Any idea?
The date I haven't changed. That keeps changing because they told me 2 years ago California was going to be the leader of all this stuff, and obviously has not happened.
There's 3 airports in Northern California that I think it's Morgan Hill, Reed Hillview, and I'm not sure if it's Palo Alto or San Jose. They're already selling some kind of 94 UL or something. So
did you see the T-6 on display that said they were running the U100?
I did not.
Yeah, it was near the Phillips booth or something. I think it was the Swift Fuel, and they were advertising running for the last year or whatever on their unleaded fuel.
Wow, interesting. Well, I hope they come up with something, because California is going to lead the pack. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case. So anyway, so engines are doing great. We are seeing more cylinder cracking, and so the pre-flight is really important just to make sure, and I'm probably a little more dialed in now. We had the 2 cylinders in the B-25 that broke were the cylinder barrel separations that we found in Texas. So unfortunately, it's happening. We've got to really be careful. So there's a couple places where you'll see it. They're cracking spark plug to spark plug across the top of the head. So I'm using a flashlight on all my pre-flights now to make sure I'm able to really give it a good look. They're also cracking at the head barrel junction, and you can normally see some oiling or something going radially across the bottom of the cylinder head where it screws onto the barrel. Anyways, and then the exhaust ears on the cylinders are also cracking and failing at a pretty decent rate as well. So when you're pre-flight and check those, check the nuts on the rocker shafts on each side. Sometimes those will start leaking. They are having some rocker shafts crack in the threads where those nuts sandwich onto the ear of the cylinder. So they're having those. They've apparently been stretched sometime over their life, and those are having a tendency to let go now as well. So just look for leaks and just be relentless about it. It's important to keep the engine clean so that you can see when you have something that's starting to talk to you. I have a chip light in my airplane that I have had go off a couple times in my use of the airplane, and I think that's a really good investment because you can catch stuff early. From the maintenance side, they want the valves adjusted every 100 hours of operation. They're suggested to check the cylinder base nuts every 100 hours. There's a bolt underneath the magneto that is good to check at every annual, which we did. And then the blower to power section nuts on the back of the case, make sure those are tight. And then the prop, they've actually had trouble with the prop nuts on some props weren't properly tightened when the propeller was installed. And so if that nut gets loose, you get a little bit of vibration, but the worst thing is it'll damage the threads on in the crankshaft. And so those are pretty delicate, and they can have your crankshaft get condemned. So anyway, so a lot of guys are running the external filters. You guys have one on your airplane, which is great. That was replaced at the annual. And then those are, you cut the top off with a cutter, and then you can spread the element out, and it's about 12 feet long. And you just check out for any metal chips or flakes or anything that might be going on. You could have bearing material. You could have aluminum from piston pins. There's all kind of different places metal can occur, and so you can generally read what the metal is, and you can determine what's starting to talk to you. A couple of pictures here, just kind of where some of these failures are occurring. So the lower left arrow there is the barrel to the head issue. The spark plug's going across the top. I got hold of Covington and had him send me some pictures so we can just kind of see how we're looking. So here are the locations where the failures are occurring. We can see like the ears where it says number 10. You can see the paths across through those cooling fins where they'll fail. And the very bottom arrow is the bottom of the head where it screws onto the barrel. And so if you look at some of these, you can see the cracks that are occurring in there. And they're hard to see on these pictures, but you can see them with a light when you're just kind of really looking at them close. And some are really obvious, like that one. Sometimes the whole piece will sever. So you can see how some of these are super destroyed. And then here's like an interesting little diagram that just talks about the pressure. There's 1,200 psi. Every time those valves close, the piston compressor thing fires. There's 1,200 psi pushing on the inside of that cylinder head. So it just cycles and cycles and cycles, and so it just is kind of what it is. Look at this one. This broke in half and just came off. And here's a top of a barrel, lower part of a cylinder head broke off. Crack right there. Now here's the top of the rocker shaft, and the valve cover broke off. So just showing us what's happening. So we got to be respectful and careful of the airplane. So don't overboost it. Make sure if you're running 36 inches, you're getting 2250 RPM. If you're not getting the RPM, get the manifold pressure back to match what you're getting for RPM, things like that. So this chart is a little hard to see, but it's showing that with different types of fuel, there's 600 horsepower, 2250 RPM, 36 inches. Max cruise is 73% rated on horsepower, so you're getting about 4,000 horsepower at 2,000 RPM and 26 inches. And then cruise at 55% power, and that's a much lower RPM than we would use. So usually at about 55 to 60% power, it's going to be around 1,850 RPM. So that chart is a pretty good chart for just seeing what's going on with the operating output of the engine. And they don't lean the airplane until you're back. So auto lean, they start leaning at about 70% power. So, and then let's see. Here's just some more data. Sorry, it's hard to see. The diving max overspeed RPM is 2,640 RPM. So takeoff's 2250. So you're getting not quite 400 RPM as allowable max overspeed RPM if the airplane's diving or the running out of gas and don't pull the throttle back, and it starts to speed up again when it refills itself with fuel. So, all right. So formation flying presents some unique opportunities as guys get into that. So just a few words about that. So in the old days, they used to say, just put the power, if you're on the wing, just put the power at 2,000 RPM, and whatever it takes for manifold pressure, it is what it is. They've been having some trouble with ring flutter, with the engines not having enough cylinder pressure to keep the pistons from rattling if you run too low a manifold pressure versus RPM. So it's always a good idea to try and keep +8 or +10 spread, just so you're not going to be damaging your engine. So that's another thing to just kind of be thinking about. Okay, so let's move on to the fuel system. Any questions on any of that so far? No? Okay, great. All right, so we've got 2 tanks of 55 gallons, 110 gallons total. We talked about the G model having an extra 30 gallons, so good for them. We've got an engine-driven fuel pump. We've got the wobble pump. Those are working well. The primer is going to prime the upper 5 cylinders. That's a test question, just so you can kind of be prepared for that. Fuel selector is left, right, off, and reserve on the stock airplanes. Let's see here. Okay, gauges we've got on the floor, obviously. In the stock airplanes, there's a standpipe in the left tank. And so what that means is reserve runs out of the bottom section, which would be the bottom 20 gallons, so 35 off the top, 20 on the bottom. Okay, let's see here. And then Ben, remind me, on this airplane, do you have a reserve setting, or is it just left and right?
It's just left and right.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a much simpler setup. So that's kind of a G flavor that's in the Harvard too. So I'm not sure the history and why that they did that, but the nice thing about having the quote unquote the stock style is it gives you a chance to really track how much fuel you're using. You can use a half an hour off each side, then you go back to the left, and the left runs out, go back to the right, and then you've got 20 gallons at the bottom of the left tank. So as you fly the airplanes, that's just something that you'll realize what that is, right? Okay, so there's the 20, the 35, and the 55 on the right. Okay, let's see. You can see the lights there. Talk about that. The G model has two low lights. We use a G, so that's why we kind of put this in there too. So an important thing to know as you fly other airplanes is you always want to know what type of fuel valve is installed in the airplane. If the airplane you're flying has an old stock valve, put your arm around the guy and say, you better change that darn fuel selector valve. Real quick, we had a guy up at Paso Robles a year ago, and we were at a little fly-in that guy had. He just bought the airplane from a guy in Northern California. And Schuster and I went after him and said, hey, great job getting the airplane. What model fuel valve do you have? Oh, I have the stock valve, but I'm going to change it to the newer valve. And so we said, hey, does the airplane cross feed? If it's on the ground, you've got maybe you start out with 55 gallons on the left, you got 20 on the right. You come out the next day, has it equalized? Is the gas moving through the valve or what? He said it was. We said, okay, don't change tanks unless you're over an airport. Keep as much gas in the airplane as you can. Change the valve as soon as possible. But what happens is in those old valves, there's a cork. It's a tapered cork. It's got a shaft going through the middle of it. The cork is varnished. And at 80 years, the varnish is breaking down. The cork is hanging up between the ports, and the little stem will move inside the cork, and it'll leave it in position randomly. Well, guess what? On Monday, leaving that flying, the valve came loose from the turn pin, and he put it in a field near Stockton. So really messed up the airplane. You guys have the new valve, which is great. So just as you move into other airplanes, other equipment, really important that you know what you're flying. Here's an example with a cork.
Hey, Tom, Jonathan has a question.
Jonathan, go ahead. I think you're muted. Here we go.
Do we know when the fuel low lights turn on, what the capacity is at that point in our airplane?
Let's see. So those they normally turn on at about 20 gallons per side when they come on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a picture of the valve that we all changed away from. The old valve is the one on the left. The new valve you guys have is on the right. But as you fly the airplanes, as you will, always just make sure you know what you got in there. Here's a diagram of the stock fuel system. So 2 tanks, reserve. So you got the primer off to the side, a carburetor, fuel pump, fuel unit. So the next thing to just be aware of is that there's a single line, there's a dual line system installed in both airplanes. Your system is a little more complicated than what it needs to be. It works fine. I wouldn't bother changing it right now. But the main thing that you have to be concerned about is if the engine-driven fuel pump stops, and it stops in a certain location, if the fuel lines aren't plumbed properly, the wobble pump will not push fuel past the fuel pump and get it to the carburetor. And so there was a big brouhaha about that about 10 years ago. Your airplane works fine. It's just not plumbed the way most stock airplanes are, but we checked it for fuel and it works fine. Maybe someday, when you change hoses, you might want to replumb it, but not that big a deal. But we always want to make sure that you've got that taking place. The other thing is it's always dangerous to have a fuel line without restrictors in it going into the cockpit. And so there's a little restrictor that you put on the back of the fuel gauge setting to minimize that. And you guys have that. So just another kind of deal. All right, diagram of the fuel system. That's a single line there where the purple arrow is. And so we probably beat that to death. That's enough of that. Okay, let's talk about fuel planning for a minute. So you take off at 36 inches, 2250 at 66 gallons per hour. Your max continuous is 32.5 and 2200, about 55 gallons an hour. And 30 and 20 aerobatic power is about 42 gallons per hour. And then when you're in cruise power at 25 and 18, 26 and 1850, you'll be about 30. So that's just some planning, fuel burns there. Any questions on fuel? Excellent. All right, just a picture, just kind of where everything's located in the airplane. As you can kind of see, the back seat drives. There's a link that drives the fuel selector, slaves to the front. And you got, various tank gauge and stuff here. You can see the wobble pump in front of the tanks. And so, and again, depending on what the way your airplane is set up, some fuel pumps regulate fuel pressure at the pump. The stock airplanes had a regulated pump, and all the fuel pressure was regulated by the wobble pump. So the bottom of the wobble pump, you can see there's a little bellows down there, and that's where the stock airplanes had their fuel pressure regulated. Okay, oil system. Any questions on fuel before we move on to oil? Everybody good? Awesome. Okay, 10.2 gallon oil tank. There's an oil cooler, it's a thermal valve, oil pump, and temp and pressure gauges. They're pretty straightforward. The oil filter on your airplane, it goes oil out, it goes to the filter, then it goes to the cooler. So if you have an engine issue, making metal, the filter should catch everything, and it should keep the oil cooler clean. I think that's a really good system. Some systems that have a bigger can than what you guys are using, but what you have is certainly better than just having the screen itself. The screens are like 250 microns, and the filters go down to about 10. So you're getting a lot of carbon and crud out of the oil, which is going to help the engine run a greater number of hours. So that's kind of a drawing there. Question: is it possible to damage the oil tank if the tank is overfilled? And so answer is yes. You can damage. You can make a tank puff if the thing is overfilled. And so I think that's a really important. It's an important thing to be thinking about as an organization, because if as airplanes sit for a week or 2 weeks or whatever when they haven't flown, depending on the condition of the oil pump and where the prop stops and where the valves are open or closed, you can get oil draining out of the tank into the engine in some fashion. And we've had it happen at Palm Springs where one of the Mustangs had a habit of, we call it hiding oil. So you'd park the airplane at 10 gallons and then in 2 weeks it'd be showing 6. And so somebody was wanting to help out. They topped off the oil tank, not realizing that. The tank got puffed and damaged the inside of the tank. And so anyway, it's just something to be aware of. Really good idea to record hot oil. When you shut the airplane down on the log sheet, airplane's got 9 gallons, whatever it has. Just make sure it's making sense before people randomly start adding oil to it. The problem is the vent lines aren't big enough to allow oil to come over the side if you've got an extra gallon or 2 of oil in the airplane. Okay, hydraulics. The reservoir is 0.77 gallons. Nice round number. That's a test question. We've got an engine-driven hydraulic pump. I've got a power push control valve in the stock airplanes. You guys don't. All of your controls are working right on the handles like the G's do. Sorry. There's a filter, there's a pressure gauge. You got flapping gear actuator indicators, and your hand pumps in the engine compartment. I think. Is that right, Ben? I'm forgetting. Sorry, I'm flying different airplanes here. Is your hydraulic hand pump in the engine compartment or is it in the airplane, in the cockpit?
It's in the cockpit.
All right. Okay. Good. That's better. All right, so the system can operate about 1,000 psi plus or minus 50. Stock airplanes have a power valve that gives you about 2 minutes of actual dwell time. Your guys just works on the handle, so you don't have to worry about that. We're using 5606 red hydraulic fluid, not vegetable fluid, not Skyrol, so it's a good thing there. Okay. Let's see. All right, there we go. Okay, hydraulics. Okay, here we go. All right, so we got a couple of hydraulic actuators that pull the main gears up. We got some locking pins that hold the gear in position. They work kind of like door latches. I've got a hydraulic pump that's gonna always turn and spin, but it's not pressurized until we call for hydraulic energy. So the fluid is just cycling through the system. We got a flap valve. The flap cylinder is kind of the lowest point in the system, so those always get all the junk and moisture and crap in them. So every 5 or 6 years, we've got to take those things apart, clean them out, make sure they're not getting any corrosion stuff in there. See, there's also a ratchet valve that keeps the flaps set, keeps the fluid from moving back and forth after you've set the flap setting. So pretty simple system, works really great. Okay, so there's a picture of the tank. Some airplanes have a line going to the brake master cylinder, some don't. Yours does not. You just have a master cylinder that fills itself, does not have a very big reservoir. You can kind of see how all this stuff is plumbed there. So the master cylinder onto the brakes is going to be is actually self-contained in your case. The entire brake system in the Harvard has only about 16 ounces of fluid, so about 2 cups. That's all it is. So if you had a brake leak at a wheel cylinder and you see brake fluid, coming out of the tire, it's a good idea to address it as well as you can, as quick as you can. The little 1 1/4 inch slave cylinders, they work well and seal well, but a lot of the guys are going to an O-ring now, going away from the chevron seals, and they do work a lot better. Okay, let's see. There's kind of a diagram showing all this stuff here. Okay, let's see. There's the fill port right there on the brake master cylinder. You can see there's a little 90-degree bell, and it's got a little stem on the top of it, which is actually the vent. And so you just take the vent tube out of the top, look in the bell, and make sure you got fluid at the top of the bell, and you're good to go. Okay, electrical system. So 24, 28 volt system, 50 amp alternator, generator, whichever you happen to have. The stock airplanes are using carbon pile, reverse current relay, and generators. They work great. As long as they work really good. Most guys get rid of them when they start having to replace components, because the generator itself is like $2,500. The carbon piles are expensive. The carbon pile regulator is $1,700 now. So they start crapping it out, just convert it to an alternator, and they work just fine. Okay, here we go. All right, so here's just kind of a diagram that's showing the main battery bus and what they call the console bus. And you've got all the components there. You're going onto the bus. So you got the battery switch. It used to be an inverted flight battery cutout valve. Those have been pretty much done away with. So you've got a switch to bring the generator online. It's reverse current relay. In the case of an alternator, it's just a diode. Does the same thing. So that's kind of shows all the original equipment that's in there back in the day as well. Okay, so this was kind of a little bit of a side trip. I don't remember, Ben, did you guys put the Chino battery in there?
The which ones?
They call it the Chino battery. Remember we talked about it a couple of years ago with some of your guys.
We're still with kind of the stock stuff.
You still got like the Concorde in there? Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of what this is all about is a lot of guys have gone to what's called a Chino battery to just save money. There's a fuel approval available to everybody that has a T-6 or Harvard or SNJ using a stainless steel box that comes out of a jet. And it's the same footprint size as a Concorde battery on its stainless steel case and a top. And you can use 2 Odyssey batteries, 2 12-volt Odyssey batteries. You put them in... I guess you put them in series. That gives you 24 volts, gives you about 600 amps of cranking power, and the batteries are $150 a piece. So after you have the system fabricated, instead of paying $1,000 every time the battery crapped out, or $1,500, you just spend $300. And so that's a super nice way to go. So they're not $150 now.
Any restrictions on the STC as to where you can locate it?
Nope.
Okay, so keep them under the seat then.
Under the seat or on the pan or up in front of the fire, wherever you want to put it. Yeah, most guys have them under the seats. Nowadays, just get the CG back a little bit. So yeah. All right, let's move on to propellers. So the airplane's using a 12D40. The 40 is a spline count on the end of the crank. It's a counterweighted constant speed propeller. The blades start out in a 6101-12, which is the full length propeller. They can run as short as a -14. After you've cut them 3 or 4 times, they get short. You got to find new blades, and blades are unfortunately getting very expensive. Like I heard a guy paid $40,000 for a complete prop a couple of months ago. So good news, bad news. Parts are around. They're just getting more expensive. So the swing of the prop is 12 degrees to fine pitch and 26 degrees to coarse pitch. And the counterweights are balanced by the oil pressure on the governor to be able to, balance high pitch to low pitch. works really good. Let's see. So if you have a governor failure, usually the governor will move the blades. If you have a governor failure and the pump in the governor quits, usually what will happen is the counterweights will move the prop blades to coarse pitch. Okay, so it's backwards what it would be on the Doll. It's backwards what it is on the Mustang. So I had it happen one time where I was flying along. I was close to an airport, and all of a sudden the engine started kind of rumbling. I looked down. The manifold pressure was going up to like 28, 30 inches, 32 inches. RPM was going down to like 1,400 RPM. And so what had happened is the pump and the governor quit working. The counterweights moved the blades to coarse pitch, and it's like shifting the car into fifth gear when you're going 20 miles an hour. Just lugs the crap out of it. So I played with the governor or the prop handle. It didn't do any good. Fortunately, I was near an airport, so I was able to get in and land it. But it's not a great thing. Like the prop on the Mustang and the Doll, they're going to go the other way. They go to flat pitch, so it has its own set of problems there as well. But anyway, as far as a shutdown, most guys will last flight of the day, they'll pull the prop handle back, run the thing at 1,200 RPM or so, and they want to cover up the piston and the cylinder, keep dirt and grit off of it, so forth. If that wasn't done, just make sure when you start the airplane, you've got the prop control all the way back to keep the oil on the crank, and don't let it go to the prop yet until you get the airplane running, to get the engine running, get good flow and good oil pressure. There's kind of a diagram of that. You can kind of see on the yellow, you've got the where the oil is going to move the blades. You got the counterweights, going against it. So thing works great. It's a really, really good system. They're fairly easy to maintain, and here we are 8 years later, they still work great. Any questions on the prop? Jonathan, Ben, Steve, anybody? No? Very good. Okay, carb air. Still got filtered air, we got carb heat. The carb heat wants to be above the yellow line on the carb air temp gauge. That'll keep it from icing. I've seen some icing occur on a high humidity day when it's a cool day, like down in the 50s or less, something like that. I always am watching that, make sure I'm not getting any carb icing. You can kind of see how that works. So there's a mixing chamber, so air is going to go down that left inlet on the left side of the airplane. It gets filtered and goes down to the engine compartment. When you have carb air, it goes from inside the engine compartment and mixes and goes right up in the carburetor. So question: so if you're using carb heat air, is the air going to be filtered?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so it's not. So just something to think about if you're flying in a big windy day or crappy, even fires, right? Fires have a lot of soot and crap in the air if you're getting a volcano. So, I always try and
Smoky day at Oshkosh.
Yes, exactly. They had some guys with some engine damage. Like there was remember that Mount St. Helens, that volcano that blew up in Washington State 23 years ago? They had a lot of airplanes have ring damage and stuff flying around there because their filters weren't adequate. All right, let's move on to flaps. So we got a 3-section flap, hydraulic operated, link rods, and push-pull rod driven by an actuator, 45 degrees of deflection, 125 mile an hour max. You can use them faster, even as high as like a little bit faster. But good idea to be really kind to your flaps. You can break little link rods, and you can damage flaps if you extend them too fast and airload them too highly. Good idea to crank them down and just kind of check, make sure they're all working good. So on the flap control, you've got up, you have lock, and you have down. So Jonathan, you'll experience this. So as you're flying along, you want to put some flap down. You'll take the flap handle from the lock position, put it in the down position. You get 10 or 20 flaps. You put the handle back up. You go past lock, goes a little bit toward up. All the flaps come out. So everybody's gonna experience that. So you're kind of rubbing your belly and patting your head sometimes on this one. There's a set of followers in the front pit, a couple for the gear and one for the flaps. That'll help you know exactly what you have going on. System works really nice. All right, let's go on the landing gear. So we've got our retractable landing gear. Tail gear, of course, is fixed. So the gear has locks up, has locks down. The extension is a couple 2 to 2 3/8 inches, kind of depending on the maintenance book that you want. If the struts run on the 2 to 2 3/8 inch level, the ride of the airplane is super nice. You know, it rides along like an old Cadillac and really feels good. If you got them up too high, you'll kind of be, clunking along like pogo sticks and everything else. Landing gear handle is a 3-position handle. You've got up, down, and override. And let's see, I got a picture here. Oh, it's kind of a side comment. It is possible to get gear lights down and not have gear locked, just the way the system works. The true way to tell if the gear is down and locked is to look in the window. Always try and have guys, there are like 7 ways you can tell the gear's down. If the handle's down, you've got the 2 followers are down, 2 lights are down, and then you can pull the throttle back and get a horn. Or you won't get a horn if the gear is down and locked, and the two windows to check as well. So anyway, so there is a concern that if the gear doesn't make it all the way down, and you try and push the over center emergency extension of the gear pins, you can theoretically lock a gear out of position. So if you've got a situation where you're not getting a green light and you can see the top of the gear through the window, and the pin's not coming forward, you might have a broken spring, you might have a bunch of crap in there from dirt or whatever. Once you can see that the gear is in the down position, if you don't have a pin, you can run the gear handle all the way down to the bottom by your foot, and that'll stroke the pin in for you. So I guess just the main thing is make sure you don't lock the gear out of position if you have a pin that's not going in by itself. Gear extension 150. A lot of guys use 140 just to be easier on the gear doors. I did see an airplane come in one time and actually bent the gear door back because he'd overspeeded the gear. Here's kind of a picture of what we're talking about here. So on the left side, you can see the gear pin is in position, but there's no gear. The end of the pin, end of the lock pin is cut like on a 45-degree angle, so it works kind of like a door latch. And so as the gear comes into position, it'll go by the latch, and the latch will extend via spring pressure. And so if it doesn't lock after you set it up, that's when you want to use that over center device, where actually pushes the pin forward. Okay, so if the hydraulic system has died, no big deal. Slow at 125, put the gear handle down, the gear will fall. You get out of the airplane if necessary to lock the gear in place. Check the windows, pull the throttle all the way back to make sure you don't get a horn, and you're good. Okay, any questions on the gear? Everybody copacetic on that?
Do you have something about the tail wheel lock and unlock?
I believe I do. I believe I have them coming up. If not, we'll just talk through it. Okay, here's a really good thing to have. Did we get a set of these? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, there's a set in a black pouch in the baggage.
Yeah, that's excellent. These are like $50 a piece. If the airplane ever ends up on its belly, these screw into just take the windows off. These screw into the top of that casting on each gear, and you can pick the airplane up.
I don't know.
If you don't have those, you're going to get a forklift to get the airplane off the runway, and bad thing. So these are super good to have. I'm glad you guys have them.
They're set on you.
There's the port right there. You can screw them in. Anyway. Okay, so here we go onto some speeds here. So, trivia question for you guys. So, V&E and these airplanes is 240 miles an hour. And so there's an interesting story about the Navy wanting to use the SNJs to train for guys that are going to go on to fly the SBDs. And so they were trying to duplicate the profile an SBD would fly, where it either rolls on its back or they push over to about 70 degrees. dive the airplane down. So they wanted to use SMJ as a trainer. Guess what happens at 260 miles an hour in a Harvard or a T-6 or an SMJ?
Water.
So you could have some flood or higher speeds. It's actually, the airframes are actually pretty darn good, but there's three things that'll happen when you go over 240. So you get, say, 250, 260. So the first thing that'll happen is the glass panels will start blowing out because they're held in by rubber. And so the glass panels will start blowing out. The rear hood will blow off. And at about 270, the cowling will actually come apart. And in some cases, the cowling would come off and actually hit the tail, the horizontal. There's a picture of a guy coming back to land with a cowling section, essentially bent onto to one of the horizontals. So crazy. So anyway, so they stopped using the airplane as an SPD trainer. And so anyway, 240 is a good number. It's been documented and verified. So,
jerk.
Keep it at 240 or less. Okay, let's see. So there's a picture of some of the gauges, just kind of showing some of the temps. So we normally want to see 20 degrees centigrade before we taxi, 40 degrees centigrade on the oil before we run up, and probably 50 or so to fly. Oil temperature, the range is like 60 to 80 centigrade, something like that. Over 95 and the oil's getting too hot. Oil pressure, 70 to 80, likes 80 pounds, 80 psi, or is a good number. Fuel pressure likes 3 to 4 pounds. You can actually blow the float off the seat if you get over 6 pounds. The airplane will run super fat, so really important to keep the fuel pressure 3 to 4 pounds. Let's see, the airspeed there, 240. The G range is 5.67 to minus 2.33. And so suction, normal 375 to 425. Any questions on instruments on that one? Okay, cylinder head. So I see a lot of guys that I fly with just other places, Plains of Fame or, Palm Springs or whatever. Some of the newer guys aren't being conscious about the cylinder head temp before they do a run up. Look at the oil temperature to 40. Engine's been idling at idle power.
Right.
It just hasn't put out enough heat to get the cylinder head temp up. So, really important to see it maybe 150 degrees on the cylinder temp before you run any big power. I think that's a test question too. Okay, manifold pressure, it's just kind of showing the limits at like 36 inches and the cruise ranges and so forth there. Any questions on dial indications? Okay, some good questions there. Okay, let's talk about prohibited maneuvers. Okay, snap rolls over 130, slow rolls over 190, spins and stalls over gross weight. Airplane spins nicely. There's a lot of kind of crazy talk about spinning the airplanes, and as long as the airplane is within gross weight, I prefer kind of a forward CG. As long as you don't wrap it up too tight, airplane spins well and comes out conventionally. If you go past 2.5, 3 turns, it'll get really tight and it'll really take you for a ride. Anyway, 45 flaps over 125, gear speed at 150. So those are our most common speed limitations. So gross weight normally is 5,300 pounds. We saw 5,625 in the G model. And as we were kind of laughingly saying, it was a stroke of a pen to get the gross weight up. So that's kind of a comforting thing, I think. G's we talked about, plus 5, 6, 7, 2.33. So Ben, talk about rolling pullouts. What's the deal about rolling pullouts? And why is the G load less?
Well, basically you're twisting everything. One wing's going to be pulling a lot more and one a lot less. So yeah, basically one twisting the airframe and twisting the wings.
Exactly. So the limit's going to be 3.7 Gs roughly on a rolling pullout. Another thing too is just remember it's an 80-year-old airplane, right? So I wouldn't be throwing 5 Gs on it just because, right? I mean, it's like 3 Gs in a loop's probably plenty. I don't know, whatever. Just kind of, I guess, it is what it is. All right, so here's our load factor sheet. So you can see the dotted line goes up to the accelerated stall. You can see the speeds and the projected G limits. It's basically the square root of the G is going to give you, you can calculate all that out. So they get into a thing called cornering speed, which is kind of an interesting discussion. So the max cornering speed of this thing is about 175. So there's been some discussion about if you really get in trouble and you're going fast, slow down. The cornering speed is going to break the airplane and pull as you need to. So anyway, I hope nobody ever really gets into that, but that's kind of the exercise they were talking about with that. So let's see. Okay, so we got some stall speeds here based on gears up, gear up, gear down, flaps up, flaps down. So normally the airplane is going to stall at about 66 miles an hour or something like that with flaps and gear down, and 76 with the airplane being clean. So some just good reference numbers there. Here's a little chart showing about stalling speeds and characteristics, and just kind of talking about what's going to affect stall, what's going to affect stall speeds. So it's just kind of aerodynamic, kind of stuff. So here's a dive chart. It's kind of showing that if the airplane is diving, based on speeds and dive angles, how much altitude can be lost. So you take the chart up there at 10,000 feet, and you're going dive angles like 60 degrees. You can lose can take about 1,000 feet to pull it out. Different airplanes obviously are different. The Mustang can lose 4,000 to 5,000 feet in the same configuration. So, and I guess the whole thing in this chart is when you start the pull, you've got to be at 4 Gs before you are really measuring the altitude loss. If you're at 3,000 feet and you're starting to pull, you're gonna eat up a bunch of precious space before you get the G to really do the recovery. So good to know about that. Okay, approach to landing speed in the T-6. So you're generally going to be 125 miles an hour on the 45, 120 on downwind, 110 on base, and 100 going down to about 85 on final, something like that. And so the military is always advocating a 3-point landing. You land a pretty nice 3-point. And so that's that profile. And then the go around, the go around in the book is 30 inches and 2,000 RPM. And above 90 miles an hour, you milk the flaps up above 200 feet. So you just don't want to have the airplane sneaking out on you when you start pulling the flaps up. Okay, so this is the glide distance chart. So 100 miles an hour at 9 statute miles, you get 9 statute miles, for each 5,000 feet altitude. And so that's a pretty illustrative chart there. So if you're up at 10,000 feet, theoretically the airplane will go 18 miles. Excuse me. All right, here is this is the high key, low key emergency glide chart. And so notice the high key over the airport at 3,000 feet, probably 105 miles an hour or something like that. And you've got an alternate in the middle key and a low key on this chart. And I've got copies of that I can send to everybody if you'd like to have it. Pretty good thing. I had an engine failure Hollisher one time, and I was aiming for a third to half of the way down the runway, and I had a bigger wind than I thought. I landed right about the numbers, and I was aiming for a third to halfway down the runway. So really important to kind of have this dialed into your head, because we don't practice it every day, and when you need it, you want to make sure that you're not coming up short. Okay, so personal habit. I try and always tell myself today's the day, and I'm trying to get rid of that 3 to 5 seconds of oh shit time. If I have an event, and so I'm always trying to have a plan, so I know where I'm going to go. I'm going to push the airplane over and fly the airplane, and so anyway, so a lot of discussion about the the what are they calling that turn? I'm forgetting what they're calling it. I guess not the fatal
impossible turn.
Impossible turn. Yeah. So good idea to kind of have that in your mind. Is it 1,400 feet over? What's it going to be for the T6? I think Ben and I were playing with it. I think Phil and I were talking about it too. So anyways, here's just a note out of the book, just talking about the forced landing, and you want to have the prop full decrease to maximize your glide. flaps up maybe at the bottom to be able to, slow the airplane down as best you can. All right, so glide ratio here, gear up, flaps up, it's about 9-to-1. Gear down, flaps up, 7-to-1. And then gear and flaps both down, you're about 6-to-1 at 75 miles an hour. So just good data to just kind of study and kind of have in your mind. The bailout from either cockpit, and talk about dive toward the trailing edge of the wing. Their airplane is turning or spinning, you want to go to the outside of the spin. And minimize damage. Minimize the danger of getting hit by the airplane in the turn, and dive behind the wing, and good luck. All right, here's a chart talking about takeoff distances and so forth at different temperatures. Normally, at Riverside you're going to be probably on a ground run of probably 1,200 feet, something like that. Maybe 1,900 feet over a 50-foot obstacle on a cool day. On a hotter day, probably like 2,200 feet. And to be able to get off the ground, another, probably another 1,000 feet over 50-foot obstacle, something like that. So another good chart. Okay, so this one is let's see. This is a landing chart here, and so this would show at 75 miles an hour, 6,000 pound gross weight, sea level. About 900 foot ground level, 600 foot to clear a 50-foot obstacle. Airplane gets on nice and short. If you get the speed on track, 45 flaps. So the fly is good. All right, things to think about here. So, cold engine operation and why. We talk about having 20 degrees C before we taxi out. Want to have a good cylinder head temps before we run power. Hot mag check, good practice. Make sure that the mags are going to ground. Maybe as you come in, just go ahead and hit the mags real quick, make sure they're grounding. Just another scenario to kind of talk about it. So what if you're pulling the thing through and you get a hydraulic lock? How do you address it? Steve, what would you do if you're pulling it and you realize you've got a hydraulic lock? You turn it backwards. What do you do? How do you rectify it?
Personally, I'd call my crew chief and have him take the spark plug out.
Nice. Seriously, no. Yeah. So I've seen it happen once in a while. It just kind of depends on the airplane, how many hours on the engine, blah blah blah. But for that reason, I always try and pull it through myself or with one of you guys from Harvard, because sometimes you get guys, hey, I'll help you. And they want to tug on it. You got a big, long 3-foot lever, and you're pulling on it. You got an articulating rod or something there. So, I know people want to help, but I would suggest, probably not the best idea. So, anyways, going to pull. I pull all the bottom plugs when I get one, and then I motor it through and try and just get it to spit oil out of it. The thing with the radials on a tail dragger, you're always going to have oil kind of going to the back. And so even though you pull the plugs when you start it, you probably are still going to get some crap coming out of the exhaust stack. But hopefully it's not going to be enough to hurt you or anything, right? So anyway.
Big syringe with a piece of tubing.
What's that?
Big syringe with a piece of tubing is what I use.
Exactly. Some guys use the blow. They take the spark plugs and drill them out and use those and burp plugs or whatever. Anyway, let's talk about back seat, front seat functionality. So let's pick on Steve again. So Steve, what can you do from the front seat and not the back seat?
You can raise the landing gear.
Okay. Yeah. How about the mixture control?
Show me.
They're linked together.
Yeah. So in a stock
You can
airplane,
go rich, but you can't go lean from the back seat.
That's correct. That's correct, Gary. So there's actually a little ratchet and a little set of teeth on the front seat mixture control, and you can push it forward, but you can't pull it. You can't pull it out of cut off in the back seat.
I think it's whatever you want the back seat passenger not to be able to do.
Yes, exactly. Okay, and let's see. I think those are the main two things. Okay, so then the other thing is, make sure the backseat cushion, the stick. Make sure if you're flying it by yourself, make sure that you've got all of that sanitized. And so, lock everything down good, wrap up the parachute, whatever. And then as another caution, the Harvard was actually up at Edwards on a contract. I had my airplane there, and John Self was flying the Harvard. And airplanes started getting away from the front seater in the Harvard. And we had done an exercise with both of our front seaters. Clear hands. I got the airplane to get your hands up. Clear your feet off the controls, off the rudders. Well, his guy didn't pull his feet back and put them on the lower floorboards. He moved them off to the side. And then John gave a big, rudder input to keep the thing on the runway. And guess what? The guy's his flying boot got stuck between the side of the airplane and the rudder pedal and got jammed in there. And so John was unable to move the rudder pedal because his boot was jammed in there. The airplane went up on that wing and it went around. And we got the aileron and the hinge had to be repaired. Hinge had to be replaced. And so when you're flying with somebody else, it's a really good conversation to have. If you're letting them fly or they're in the back riding along, hey, when we're in an airport environment, I want your feet here. I want your hands away from the stick, right? So just kind of something to think about, because that's happened on a couple other airplanes as well. And let's see. I don't think the Harvard airplane, the seat doesn't turn around, does it, on the Harvard? I think it's bullet post, isn't it?
Not on ours. I think the gunner seat, we don't have that.
Okay.
But
So
what I do for on rides is when I'm giving rides, I'll run the back seat rudder pedals full forward.
Okay.
So they
So
can't.
then you guys end up flying with me at Palm Springs, which you're welcome to do if you want to. Always make sure that the gunner seat is turned around facing forward for landing. We've had situations where guys had the seat turned around, and guess what? You're trying to get up elevator and sit in the back of the seat. So, anyways, some airplanes have different stick configurations, but just if you're guest flying somewhere, just make sure that's discussed. All right, cowling pre-flight, cowling mounting, horns and latches. Okay, so the cowling should be snugged up against those little blocks, but you want the cowling to float a little bit, like maybe 1/8 of an inch. The engine's going to expand as it gets hot, and you don't want to overstress the cowling. And your airplane has these latches that come over center, and there's a latch pin in place. Just make sure all 3 of those latch pins are in place on your pre-flight. Okay, let's see, gear rollers. Okay, on the bottom of the landing gear, there's some little rollers. Those need to be free and correct and be able to roll, so they'll come out of the up latch as well. The up latches, just make sure the springs are in place on those, and they'll actually move back and forth well. Let's see. Okay. When you're pre-flighting, make sure the prop blades are crisp, not flapping around. As props wear, they'll get sloppy. And I think Steve has a picture he wants to show you about one of the prop to the counterweight arm bolts. In hot weather, I'd suggest keep the oil topped up. So you're getting more. It's good. It's air and oil cooled, obviously. So just make sure you're giving the thing a chance to cool as well as possible. Okay, so the tail extension. Some books say 2 7/8, some are 2 3/8. I've got all of them, but just the point is maybe like 3 fingers-ish is a really good height. If you get them too high, like we were talking earlier, the thing Pogo 6 doesn't do well. It'll start dusting rivets and so forth. The tail strut, you want the cutter to be parallel with the ground, so you don't need it all the way jacked up because it'll pogo stick on you. We had Mark Moody rebuild the tail strut on the Harvard at Annual. It was pretty messed up inside, so he polished all the parts, and we put a new seal kit in it, so it was sealing well. So you get the height set where we want it, and it'll last for 10 years. Let's see. Okay, on an alternator, if the thing kicks offline, pull it to idle power before you turn the switch back on. It'll be easier on the generator or alternator. Engine restarted airborne. If the engine runs out of fuel, pull the throttle back before you change tanks. Just keep the thing from going over speed when it relights again. Let's see. Okay, and then I guess another thing to think about is that the throttle is your friend when things are going bad on landing. Get some air on the tail, fly the airplane away, and come back in if you need to. Okay, another couple of thoughts here. So if you're running 36 inches and 2250 RPM and things starts to rattle a little bit, reduce the manifold pressure a little bit. You might be having some detonation. So that could be a kind of a nice thing as well. Okay, let's talk about safety equipment. Really encourage all the pilots to wear a helmet, gloves, footwear, don't wear tennis shoes, wear some boots, have a parachute, is a really good investment, and a visor. You can get a bird strike, it'll ruin your whole day. Shoulder harness, locket for takeoff and landing. And I never thought about the old G's we were talking about before. Let's see, a good investment for you guys would be to buy those underwing guards. I don't know if they're still, I know what they are. They're available, as an aftermarket, where they actually mount on the bottom of the wing attach angles. And if the airplane were to do a gear up landing, these things would protect the wing attach angles from getting ground off, which would probably save you $50,000. So that would be some I would recommend. Okay, all right. So let's see. So let's talk about the tail gear just for a minute. Jonathan had asked about that. So the P-51 tail gear has a cable that operates from the elevator that goes down to the top of the clutch head. So when you push the elevator, push the stick forward, bringing down elevator, there's a pin in the back that comes up out of a heavy plate. The plate's probably half an inch thick. There's a hole drilled in it, and it'll pull the pin out of that plate and allow the tail wheel to freely caster. And so when you have that type of system, it's important to pull the pin before you hit the brakes and try and turn the airplane. If the pin is jammed in place and you're pulling like if you're pushing like crazy on the stick, you can stretch the cable and you can damage the lifting device that pulls the pin out of the little clutch. And always make sure that the stick is locked forward when you move the airplane with a tug. Those pins and the bracket assembly are probably $900 now from Lance to replace if the thing gets broken. So I guess that's kind of most of that. Jonathan, any other questions on that? Are you still there? I can't see your picture.
Yep, I'm still here, and I think that was somebody else, so I'll defer to whoever asked the question.
Okay, sorry.
So Tom, when I went to Stallion 51, their biggest thing about that was they showed us the part and the pin.
Yep.
And they said, make sure that whenever you're turning the plane around, to have that stick fully forward, because I had a tendency to actually release pressure in my elbow, so the stick was not full forward. And if the stick is not full forward, that pin will drag on the disc, and then it creates a groove in that disc. And we want to prevent that because you don't want to spend $1,000 to replace it. Yeah. So make sure that whenever you're turning the plane, to have that stick fully forward so the pin is not dragging on the disc.
Yep. That's a good catch.
And you'll see in the chat also, you talked about Powers, your friend, on landing. I put 3 pictures of a pilot who was landing my plane at Paris, so everybody can see those. That he did not use Power as his friend.
Yeah, it's like you hit it right on the head. I had a situation with my airplane where I had locked the stick forward with a little device underneath the front seat. It's got a little lever. You push it forward. There's a little tit that goes into like a round piece of metal, and it locks the thing in place. Apparently, I didn't have the thing all the way locked in place. So if you take the lever and you push down on the lever, there's a little tit goes in a little half moving piece of metal, and if the tit is through the metal, it's pretty secure. And so I think I was leaning over the side of the airplane, over the panel, and I was pushing on it to get it locked, and I didn't get it all the way engaged. As I was pushing the airplane around on the ramp, it popped out, and it allowed the pin to drop down. I didn't see it. And then when I went to turn the tail of the airplane, all I saw was the elevator kind of jumped up for a second, and then I heard the snapping sound. And it was like, oh shit, I'm on a tug with like 10 feet tow bar. So there was a lot of leverage on that tow bar moving that airplane around. and I broke the assembly that pulls the pin up and down out of the disc Gary was talking about. And you know that thing breaks, you're not flying. It would be Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. So anyway, not to beat it to death, but that was something to just be thinking about. So all right, well that's all the prepared material there. We've got a quiz that was sent by Steve attached to the invite. Are there any? Do you guys have that handy? Any questions you want to talk about before we sign off?
Did everybody see my pictures that I sent?
Where are they on?
They're in the chat. If you click on chat at the bottom.
Oh shit! Are you kidding?
Yeah, we saw. Oof.
So the first picture, I got that when I returned to my hotel in Davenport. And then there was a photographer that day that got the first two pictures. So the second picture, you can see there's a skydiver right next to him. And then the last picture, he hits the left wing. He said there was a dust devil that went across the runway there at Paris, and that's what caused it. I think he was just a low time. He had a paid rider in the back seat also during this. So the good thing is no one got hurt and no one got sued. So
Like you, that would have been terrible. So are those pictures in order?
yes. Well, no. The first picture is the last picture where it ended up.
Okay, so it went right wing, left wing, and then it went up on the nose.
Yeah.
Dang. Yeah, you know, I just in flight instructing, you know, like we were all doing, right? So every once in a while, you get somebody that's not really thinking about the throttle, you know. So they're running elevator rudder and they're doing their thing, and you know, you got to just remember that throttle, man. It'll put some air on the tail for you, and if you really need it, just fly away and come back, right? It's your friend. So it's just an extra dimension we all need to be thinking about, right?
Hey, just in this case, this guy's ego was a lot bigger than his flying ability. Put it that way.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's really bad. I guess the airplane got pretty balled up, did it?
Yeah, I bought it back from the insurance company, sold it, and it raced at Reno the last 2 years and won its class.
Really? Wow. Well, fantastic. Well, I'm glad it's back with the living, so to speak.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any questions from anybody? It's love to talk about the T-6, and there's a lot of guys here that know the airplane too. So, anything to Jerry? Any questions?
Hey, and just Jonathan is ready to jump in also whenever you get a chance.
Fantastic. Looking forward to maybe hope it'll be less temperate here shortly as well. I'm happy to get up early too. So whatever we do. So, you know, the plan is to get Phil wrapped up here as soon as we can, and then we'll get Jonathan going and whoever else wants to get in the queue. So, all right. Well, very good. So, if there are no other questions, that's all the prepared material. I hope it was somewhat helpful and just kind of have some things to be thinking about. So,
Hey, Tom, can you go over real quick the bolt that snapped?
Sure.
On the prop, because I'm trying to figure out if I can share pictures, but let me see.
Let me stop sharing and get it back over to you.
Okay.
All right. I have a meeting to go to. I'll see everybody later. Thanks.
See you, Gary.
I don't know. I don't know if I can do this anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I can't do it, but right now
We can talk about it. Okay, so in the propeller assembly, there's each of the counterweights has a bolt that comes off of the counterweight assembly, and it connects to the hub or to the it connects to the piston of the propeller. And so as the piston and the cylinder are moving in and out, it rotates the blades. And there's a bolt there that's the equivalent of a Jesus nut on a helicopter. And so Jesus nut on the helicopter, if that comes off, helicopter is gone, right? So on the T-6, there are 2 bolts, one for each blade that connect the blades to the counterweights. And there was an incident happened at a formation clinic. I'm going to guess it was 3 months ago. I'm not sure if it was it thermal or where was remember where the event was, Steve?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was thermal.
Anyway, so Doug Schuster was in the back of a guy doing it at a formation clinic, and one of those bolts broke. And so, one blade's trying to track it, pick a number, 15 degrees, whatever it's doing, and the other blade is basically flopping around, and it vibrates, and you can't even see the panel. So your only choice is basically chop power and turn and try and get the thing on the ground. And those bolts they're probably $35 a piece, and so there are different models of these bolts, but super important to make sure that you're watching those at annual inspections. There's a I think in this case that was an aftermarket bolt, and there's a company that's been making those, and it's called the company's RSW, and those bolts are not lasting the way they were hoping they would. So most guys are going back to a stock ham standard bolt, but those are super important that those be in tip-top shape. So we inspected yours; they're good to go, but it's a big deal if one of those fracture. It's your airplane is not going to fly. So preventive maintenance. It's good to keep the thing greased, so that the thing, needle bearings in there that you have to grease up. So they work great. It's a really good working propeller, but that's kind of the Achilles heel, I would say. So anyway, in that case, the bolt fractured, and the blade was just the rotational, force of the blade. It was just flopping. So you can imagine the vibration that was going on there.
Okay.
Yeah, we can send that around. I've got a bolt and a assembly, a cable. If you want me to take pictures, I can send it around.
I can email this too, but
Okay.
when you guys do your tests, and when you're done, just send them to me, and I'll take care of rally point for everybody, and call this good.
Excellent.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks everybody. Great being with you tonight, and fun talking about the airplane, and looking forward to seeing you all around.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.